Welcome back to the Haven Homestead Podcast, where we learn and grow together on our way to living more sustainable lives. My name is Chris, and welcome to episode 46. That was a little different intro, little song by Joe Purdy called Whiskey and Fish. And I believe at the end of the episode today, I'm going to play a song by Tim O'Brien called Red Dog in the Morning. And I like both of those songs. I'm kind of a fiddle and banjo fan sometimes. Sometimes it gets a little too much, but I like to listen to it. I like the folky sound. Alright, so today's episode, which is episode number 46, as I mentioned earlier, is on seed starting. So seed starting is kind of more of a science than an art. I've found out that there are some things that you really need to have if you want to have your seeds get off to the best start possible. And some of those things that your seeds need are, they need light. All seeds need warmth of some sort, and they all need moisture. Some seeds you put into the ground so far, into the ground ways, but as long as they have the light, or the moisture and the heat, they will sprout, and then when they grow up a little bit, then they need a certain light. But I remember in college, my botany classes, that they're saying that the seeds need red light to trigger their germination, their sprouting. So, that's from many years ago. So I'm not sure, if I got that exactly right. But seeds do need a bit of light, warmth, moisture, and soil, or some sort of growing medium. And I also put, and they need love. You need to love your seeds and tell them they're going to do great and they're going to grow so strong. I don't know if it actually helps, but it makes me feel like it helps. Some seeds need special inputs. So I planted some heather seeds for Lindsay that I had bought in Scotland, and I brought them back, and she's of Scottish descent. So, in fact, her mom was born in Scotland. And so I was like, I'm going to grow her some heather, because it was a thoughtful thing to do. And one of the things you're supposed to do is take some fire, like a match or a candle or a lighter or something, and kind of wave them over the seeds, not to cook them, but because heather, apparently seeds, need to be started, they get triggered by fire. So fire makes them sprout or makes them germinate or whatever. So I did that, and I got a few started. Sure enough, they went and started to grow. But the heather seeds, now they're really weird because you had to do take them out of the light in a dark, put them in a dark place for a couple days or a week or something, and then bring them back into the light, and then put them back, for a couple days, and then put them away for, it was just really weird, the needs for this particular kind of heather plant. But not all plants are this picky. I'll just warn you right there, or tell you, ease your mind right off the bat. Some seeds need to be scratched so that water can get through their protective layer to the inside, and then they'll go ahead and sprout. So they need to be in the natural world, chewed on by an animal, or have gone through the gut of a certain animal, so that it kind of makes their protective coating get scratched, and then they can go ahead and germinate. So I'm not using any technical terms here. I'm just gonna tell you as a layman terms as possible, because I don't need to sound, for my benefit, I don't need to sound all hoity-toity smart. Just as long as the point gets across, I think that's the important part. I met another guy today who says across, like with a T at the end of across. And I said, I'm so glad that you just said across. And he looked at me like, well, why? And I said, because my wife always gives me a hard time about it. And I think that's great that you said it too. It just shows that I'm not the only one that's a redneck. So some seeds, so now we've covered some of the things that all seeds need. They need light, warmth, moisture, soil, or a growing medium of some sort. And of course, love. Then they need to be started in the right time of the year. So on the back of most seed packages or seed packets, you can see how long it says, to plant. It says plant 5 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever before the last frost. So you need to find out when your last frost date. We usually like to plant out our tenders on Mother's Day, and this year it's going to be May 13th. But my last frost date is, according to the internet for my zip code, is May 21st through May 31st or something, the end part of May. But we've always planted them out the Mother's Day weekend and always been just fine with that. Now your area is going to be different because not everybody lives in the same growing zone. So if you live up in the mountains, in Idaho where we came from, your last frost date is going to be a little bit later. Your growing season is going to be a little shorter. So if your seeds are tenders, like garden vegetables and things, you don't want to plant them out too early, or they'll be frozen. They'll get some frost on them and kill them right off. Your seedlings, when you are growing your seedlings, you also want them to be mature. So when you grow your little plant, so say you're going to have your seeds at they're 6 weeks before the last frost. You want to kind of plant it and maybe even write down on a calendar when you planted your seeds. Keep a journal. That's a really good idea. Planting journal. You're going to say, I planted my seeds on, say, May 1st. Or we'll say April 1st, because maybe they needed 6 weeks. So I'm going to plant my seeds on April 1st. Then by the middle of May, on Mother's Day, if they're not big enough to be planted outside, keep track of that. And next year, start them the last week in March, or 2 weeks before, the third week in March or something like that, so that you can know in your area when you can plan on getting those seeds into the garden. Now I can go back to what I was saying before, is you want to make sure that your seeds are mature, but you definitely want to make sure that they're not overgrown. So like for instance, tomatoes need to be tall enough so that you can bury a lot of them in the ground. Say like a foot tall, we'll say that, 12 inches. So you can bury them mostly in the ground, just leaving a few leaves above ground, and then all that stem will become the main root structure. All those little hairs on your tomatoes, the tomato vines, will become a root. So start your tomatoes early enough so that they're big enough, but not so big that they've outgrown the pots, and they've become root bound and unhappy that way. Now, starting your seeds, you have to decide what you want to, if you want to reuse your pots or if you want to put the pots in the ground when you're buying your seed starting paraphernalia. The seed starting peat pots, or the little pucks that you eventually transplant into something else, are one use sort of thing. But the plastic pots you can use over and over again, but they're made out of plastic. So you got to kind of figure out where your alliances and druthers lie. A good way to find out when is a good time to plant your seeds out is to ask a neighbor. So if they say, I always start my tomatoes in February, then that might be a good idea if their plants are doing great. On Mother's Day weekend, one of the local hardware stores always has tomato plants. They're like $1.99 or $2.99 or something, and they come in like half-gallon pots, and they're almost 2 feet tall. I mean, we've bought them there several years because they're inexpensive and they're good varieties for this area. Those have always done really well because they're so well established, but it's because of the size of their pot. Well, that's one reason. I mean, he obviously has enough light and moisture and everything. But if you're going to have something that takes a long time, so Lindsay wants to grow loofahs this year, we're going to have to plant the loofah seeds into big enough pots that by the time May comes around, because we're going to start them the beginning of April or end of March time frame, when those plants are big enough to plant outside, the root structure needs to be big enough the pot needs to be big enough to where it can handle that root structure. So 6 weeks of growing inside of the house in 70-degree weather with artificial light 16 hours a day because of our Happy Leaf LED grow lights, then they should be, they'll need a bigger pot, because they're pretty vigorous growers once they have the right conditions. Keep that in mind as to what you're going to plant. If you're going to plant something like, I don't know, lettuce can probably be direct sown. Most greens that are hardy can be direct sown into your garden, and we'll talk about that organization there in a minute. But the bigger ones, or the tender stuff like your melons or your squashes or your gourds or your tomatoes or peppers, they all need to be started indoors. And just make sure that if they're ones that take a long time, that you have a big enough pot that in case you're still getting frost, they have a little room to grow. So I'm not going to tell you which ones take the longest. You just have to figure that out for yourself and do a little research. You know what that sound means? Time for a word from our sponsors. Happy Leaf LEDs Anywhere, Anytime, Garden in a Box makes a great gift for the garden lover in your life. For just $65, you get one 4-inch LED grow light and USB power supply, the LED light suspension tools, a light timer, 4 plastic net pots, hydroponic clay pellet growing medium, hydroponic nutrients, and seeds. All you have to do is add mason jars and water. With their advanced LED grow light and easy passive hydroponic starter kit, anyone can master indoor gardening anywhere, anytime. Visit www.happyleafled.com today to get your kit. Don't forget to use the coupon code FRIEND in all caps for a 10% discount. One more thing, when you see the little "Where did you hear from us" survey, let them know you heard about them on the Haven Homestead podcast. You'll be happy you did. So, a good way to get organized on your seeds is divide them into 2 piles. The sow outdoors, meaning the ones you'll plant directly into your garden, and the indoor plant ones, the sow indoors. Start indoors. With the start indoors, you want to then look at the back of the packages and divide those into what weeks, how many weeks they take, and then like rubber band them or staple them together or somehow put them into their own section so that you know that this week I'm going to start these 3 varieties or these 4 varieties. Then the next week I'm going to start these 4 varieties, and make sure you have labels that you can mark the seed tray that you started them in. Then the next week I'm going to start these ones, and by that time you should be getting really close to your direct sowing time for you to plant your seeds directly into the garden for those ones, which are most veggies and things like nasturtiums. Nasturtiums are really great. They're a direct sow, and all parts of a nasturtium is edible. Then once your seeds are started, go ahead and keep an eye on which ones are germinating quickly and slow and maybe not. If they're germinating slowly and you are not sure what's going on, maybe you're getting a really poor germination or something, try putting a heating mat underneath them. Some people just go with the heating mat right off the get-go, and that's fine. But the soil might be a little bit too cold for a lot of their seeds to feel like they're ready to germinate. So if you're having a hard time getting your seeds to go, give them a little bit of heat underneath them, and that should help kickstart their germination. Also, the light is a big deal. A nice quality grow light, like an LED, like once again from Happy Leaf LEDs. They have really nice, and our plants have just loved their grow lights, and they've done really well. And once they're kind of growing up a little bit higher, they need a timer. Your seeds should not be having light 24 hours a day. While you'll see a lot of great growth and it looks really exciting and really happy, they are growing. They need a break. They need the 8 hours off so that they can rest as well. Just like we need the rest at night, they need rest at night too. And they'll be healthier for it. They'll be thicker and healthier, where if you keep light on all the time, they'll just keep growing and growing up, and they'll become spindly and fall over. When we were in Pocatello, I had some cheap grow lights, and I put them on downstairs where I had my seed starting area, and there was a lot of seeds that were growing really good, and I was really excited by it, but I didn't realize that they were growing too fast, and they ended up being really tall and spindly, kind of like those on Little Mermaid, where there's all those mermaids that have been cursed by Ursula. That's what all of the plants look like. And one time, I think I was either taking them out, or maybe I don't know, walked by, or maybe they're just on their own. I don't know. So just the slightest of breeze hit them, and they just toppled over, fell right over. And it was not a good year for my seed starts, because I just didn't realize that they need a little bit of rest. So I'm passing that little tidbit of information onto you, and hopefully it will be something that will help you not to make the same mistakes that I have. Also, don't put too much water on your seeds. You can drown them out, and sometimes if you have too much water on for too long, it'll start to mold, and that's not a good thing either. So these are all things that I've done, and so I can pass them on to you to know that this is, too cold, too wet, not enough light, or too much light are all serious problems with starting seeds. Then once those seeds are started, just make sure that they're mature enough to go outside. And it's a good idea to get some cold frames or row covers of some sort until they get acclimatized to being outside. Some people will hardy out or hardy up or something like that their vegetables, which is they take the tray outside during the day and then bring it in at night, so that the seedlings can get used to being outside. But if you take them, direct sow them into the ground outside, and then cover them with a row cover of some sort, then you should be in good enough shape to get your garden growing. And by that time, you're getting in your lettuce and your broccolis or your different, your kale, your hardy plants that should be ready to grow, in the early spring. Your peas can be planted before the frosts, before your last frost. And I really like having the peas get an early start, because they're one of the first things that you get to eat out of your garden, and snap peas are amazing, just amazing right out of the garden. So sweet, so delicious. So this is it for today's podcast. I'm already out of time. I cannot believe how fast 20 minutes goes when I'm doing the podcast. But I just want to remind you to please head on out to havenhomestead.com and check out our website. We've had a lot of new subscribers this week, which if you're listening to this and you're one of the ones that subscribed recently, thank you very much. And if you haven't subscribed to our newsletter yet, please do. Lindsay works really hard on those, and I think she does a great job. So support her and support us by signing up for the newsletter. You can get all kinds of good little tips. Also, please consider supporting us on patreon.com. That's patreon.com/havenhomestead. And there it's really cheap to support us, and we can keep this going. I mean, my microphone stand, the program that we use for editing and recording the shows, the host for putting it on the internet, all of that was paid for by the patrons. So I really, really appreciate it, and thank you on behalf of Haven Homestead and all the people that you've helped through your patronage. Also, we are on YouTube. Just look up Haven Homestead, or Facebook, Haven Homestead 2009. Instagram, Twitter, Haven Homestead should get you in the right direction. And you can look for, if you're on that website and you've seen my picture, then you know who to look for on the other ones. I believe Instagram is The Haven Homestead, because just Haven Homestead was already taken. If you have any questions or comments, please comment on the website, havenhomestead.com, under the podcast section. That's it for this show, so thanks for listening. This has been the Haven Homestead Podcast, where we learn and grow together on our way to living more sustainable lives. Thanks for listening. And now, Red Dog in the Morning by Tim O'Brien.
afternoon. A red dog in the morning, black dog howling at the moon. When you see me coming, raise your flag way up high. Put that green boot on the fire. See your smoke when I pass by. I was walking up a canebrake. That's all I heard you call my name. I gave my horn a long blow. You can't hear me just the same. You say red dog in the morning, black dog in the afternoon. Red dog in the morning, black dog howling at the moon. Stretch a hide out on the barn wall, rubbing, scraping, tin and tame. Take my corn to the mill pond, pay that man to grind my grain. It's a red dog in the morning, black dog in the afternoon. The red dog in the morning.